Hello, good morning. So this is the group that really didn't make it out last night, I guess, huh? All right, that's good to hear. Once again, my name is Ramon Lowe. I'm the publisher of Airport Revenue News. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes. I want to thank our friends at HMS Host for hosting the opening night reception last night. I hope you guys were able to get over there and kind of experience some of the cocktails and kind of unique, cool things that they've been doing at the in their locations. I also want to thank Westfield for sponsoring the exhibit hall, and Delaware North for sponsoring the registration desk. So thank you very much for your support, and also for the day before, the sponsors of the breakfast, The Grove, Michelle Dukler, I think she's in here somewhere, or maybe downstairs. Thank you for sponsoring the breakfast. And to Mission Yogurt for sponsoring the Business Pitch Showcase. Hope you guys were there and kind of enjoyed the Ryan Smolkin show. Anyway, most importantly, I want to thank our host airport, New Orleans International, Eric Friedman, Michelle Wilcutt, and folks, thank you for being such great hosts. Thank you. And honestly, if you ever come back here and you're just coming for leisure or business, whatever it is, talk to Eric. He'll take you out to some really cool places. I know I have him to blame for the extra 5 pounds I've gained in the last few days. So thank you for that, Eric. Anyway, my friends, I'm really excited about our keynote speaker today, Sasha Strauss. He's the founder and chief of innovation for brand consultancy firm Innovation Protocol. And his line is basically that the consumer psychology has shifted. So how do we gain the trust and establish an emotional connection with our travelers when all we hear and read and all that is working against us is the negative? My friends, we're in an industry that is evolving, that's on an upswing. And all I want to say is pull out a quote from my favorite show, Mad Men, from Don Draper, when he said that, if you don't like what they're saying, then change the conversation. And that's pretty much what we're doing, little by little, year over year. Sasha has helped corporations, nonprofits, universities, and religious institutions create and communicate their brand's reason to believe. He's advised organizations like Google, Disney, the Boy Scouts, the Jewish Federation, and the Roman Catholic Church. And this morning, he is here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce Mr. Sasha Strauss.
Good morning, all. So glad to be with you. If you have a question or feedback in the middle of this rant, I would love a hand, and we'll also have a roving mic in case you want to speak into it. So I want to start my conversation by telling you that I was sitting at my desk in my office in Los Angeles. We have staff in San Francisco and New York. Our headquarters is in Los Angeles. And this is my little room. Here's my fur baby, Olive, little dog. And so I'm sitting at this desk, and I get a call from Google, who has been a longtime client of our firm. And they said to me, we did a global study, and we now understand how consumer behavior has permanently shifted. Yeah, as a human being, I was interested just in that revelation. But obviously, you and I are using Google every day, and so are our customers. And so it has an incredible reflection. It says a lot about what is happening in consumer psyche when Google sort of does a global compilation and says, this is how consumers are acting, and this is what you should know about it. The problem, I don't know if anyone has ever worked with Google. They're like engineer scientists, so they don't speak human. And they get to a point where even though they have the largest brands in the world as partners, they don't talk, because they don't understand one another. And so what Google said to me was, hey, Sasha, if we throw all this data at you, could you synthesize it in a way that will help anyone understand how consumers are behaving differently now? So I'm a little bit of a rebel, but I try to break the rules as much as I can. And so given that you are in the airport industry, you will appreciate that they wanted a PowerPoint, but I'm 6'3", and respect to all the carriers in the room, I don't fit. I just don't fit. So I can't bust open a laptop and get to work on some corporate deck. I just don't have the space. So a couple of years ago, after traveling almost every day for 11 years, I decided that I was just going to get out a doodle pad and try and get the ideas down in pen. And if I had time at my desk some month later, I would build a PowerPoint. Well, I'm still traveling every day, so you're going to get doodles. But I want to prove to you how often I'm traveling. In fact, I asked my staff, when I was talking to Ramon about coming to this conference, I said to my staff, do you have a sense of how many airports I've been in the last, just say the last 2 years? And this was their quick audit, and many of you, your home base is here. Yesterday, I was in 3 airports alone. So I am your passenger, I am your customer, I am your observer, and it's good to be with you, and I'm happy to share my reflections on your enterprises. But here I am standing before you without a PowerPoint deck because that's my jam, and I don't have time to build boring text-based documents. So what you're going to see is basically me drawing bad examples of what you want to understand. You would imagine, by the way, when Google says we want a big presentation, they're thinking classic corporate deck, and I handed them this as version 1. Now, I want you to learn from me, whether it's about brand strategy or how to present, whatever your mechanism, I want to show you something here where this is not an arbitrary, random collection of insights. You and I are human beings, and not only are you and I human beings, but we learn and remember in story form. So if you think about Star Wars or your favorite religion, they did not just tell you the construct and say, these are the rules of the Force, don't move. They added in characters and situations that help you emotionally connect and remember. That mechanism is called the story arc, and it has been universally understood and respected across cultures for centuries. We forget, though, as business leaders, that a poor human listening to our presentation needs this kind of mechanism. And so this is what I showed the Google execs. I said, I'm going to start our chat here in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to rise you up to some really cool, compelling thing that you'll get excited about. But like all great stories, humans cannot deal with only positive information. For some reason, we don't believe it. We second guess it. We need a little doubt, a little skepticism. And so every great story has a valley. It not only has a valley, the depth of that valley inspires you to reach the top of the mountain. So the Google execs were really pissed when I turned this in. Top people at Google, they get what they ask for. And I'm like, well, I'm on airplane, so here you go. And I said, well, do you want a second version? And they said, yes, so I gave them this one, and they were still pissed. And they're like, come on, I want the actual script of your speech. I said, well, how about this? How about this one? How about this one? But I'm telling you all of this because inevitably it worked out perfectly, because it didn't matter what my stupid outline looked like. It mattered that I knew that humans were on the other end. And if I only concern myself with the audience, I'll succeed at business, just like many of you know that. So here was the final version. And in fact, I think Ramon had copies of this made for you, so you can take it home if you want. But what this is an outline of what I'm going to share with you for the next 40 minutes. It starts here in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to ladder you up to some big idea that I want you to be excited about. I'm going to tell you about the bad news that's going to make it really hard to love. But then, of course, we're all here with our personal and professional time because we want to grow our businesses. So what is the opportunity? And I'm going to take you around that curve up into something that I think can change the future. Sound like a reasonable place to start our morning? All right, cool. So let's look at this little map here for a second, and you'll see where I'm coming from. Who studied world history, either in university or high school, as a priority? World history? Okay, there was a segment in world history class where they talked to us about what they called the greatest age of social change. And believe it or not, the era that they're referring to is like the 1450s in Western Europe, where everyone was being decimated by the Black Plague and other formats. And what ended up happening was a man named Martin Luther found out that there was a machine called the Gutenberg press, and that mechanism, the Gutenberg press, all it did was take all the letters that were being used to create messaging, and it replicated them. So you could make 2 copies of a document instead of one handwritten original form. That might not sound drastic to you, but prior to that point, every single document you saw in the 1400s was an original, which meant that when you went to go pray, oh my gosh, all you had was that self-appointed leader on the stage, some language you didn't speak, really inaccessible for the impassioned believers. And so Martin Luther said, I want everyone to access God. I want everyone to have their right to practice, so I'm going to take this doctrine and I'm going to replicate it. It was so impactful because finally people could think for themselves. They could interpret gods or goddesses or whatever their jam themselves. Well, if that ignited the Renaissance and the revolution in Europe that changed cultural behavior, well, I'm going to argue that you and I are in the midst of a much larger social change. If the Gutenberg press in the 1400s changed the history of Europe, what did the internet do? Well, the thing about Martin Luther's replication of text was that it took an idea and it gave it to the masses to spread. All right, if that ignited the Renaissance, then what are you and I living in right now, where we not only have the internet, but we also have things like virtual reality? Raise your hand if you've put on a pair of virtual reality goggles. Okay, about half of the room. The other half, Ramon is not going to let you come next year unless you have tried on a pair of virtual reality goggles. I'm telling you, it will reframe how you build real estate, how you assess consumer behavior. It is an astounding innovation. But it's just one thing. It's just one thing. Along with virtual reality, you have tools like augmented reality. We have big data. We have artificial intelligence, AI. Raise your hand if you have an Amazon Echo or Alexa at home. Raise your hand. A little higher so everyone can see. Okay, about a third of us. Who has Google Home? Raise your hand. Okay, just a few of us. Another assignment. By next year, you better have one of these devices in your house, not because I want you to get sold to, but because as a business leader, you need to understand how this is changing consumer behavior. That's the only reason you need to understand it. But my point is simply this. If we only had AI, if we only had big data, if we only had the internet, if we only had social media, if we only had VR, it would catalyze the greatest age of social change yet. But you and I are living in an era where all of these things together are creating these culture shifts. So I'm going to assert that we are in the midst of the greatest age of social change yet. By the way, be skeptical about it. I'm going to try to convince you that it's happening. How am I going to do that? I'm going to use story form. I'm going to say we're here, we're at the greatest age of social change yet, and there are these things happening. Let's talk about those things, but first back to my office. So here I was again at that desk, and so after I had my chat with Google, I took all of the ideas that were innate in the data and I put them on a little 3x5 card. And I put those 3x5 cards on a desk, and then I started to sort them. How did I start to sort them? I brought people into my office. I said, I learned these things, boom, 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 and they said, wow, that doesn't, card 3 and card 10, I don't see the connection. And so no matter what presentation you're about to give, it might be to your strategic partners, it might be a pitch, remember that your audience needs you to consider them in advance and think about the sequence for them. Not for you and your business goals. I want to show them the data. I understand you. Your audience is like, well, who are you? And why are you even believing in this retail opportunity, In that experience, you will see that the human on the other side of the deal will have wider eyes because they can pay attention. They can stay focused. So here we go. I took those outlines and then I started on airplanes to doodle on little scrap pieces of paper I had in my backpack. And that's what I'm going to walk you through right now. So level 1 on this map, remember this map here? We've talked about the greatest age of social change yet. Now I want to talk about, for example, how we exist and why this is fundamentally different. So do you guys remember when you were young and you're playing at your neighbor's house and your neighbor's mom was different at work than she was at church, and then different at home than she was at church? And well, that was because these environments were really isolated. There was no overlap, and so you could be your church-going self or your mosque-going self, and then when it came to family time, you could be whatever that derivative was. Well, is that how we live now? It's not only not how we live now, we're living in a state of affairs where if anyone in this room has lost someone in their life, you know that their Facebook profile is, gosh, it's like a living obituary. It's like the place where everybody goes to share love and remember them and celebrate them. That means that their digital identity, lasted longer than their physical identity. I know that feels really icky to you, but the fact is, you're only going to see each other once a year at this conference. Does that mean you're not going to stay friends and not going to be in communication? No. In fact, you might talk to each other regularly and feel connected to one another because you have more about one another to assess and respect, like being a LinkedIn connection or a Facebook connection. You can learn so much more about the business partner. But this is the thing that really blows my mind, is that our national identities, our faiths, where we lived, our jobs, our happiness, our ideas, they used to be very isolated. They used to be insulated and isolated from one another. But not now. Now we take all these things, we take all of these parts of us, and we kind of filter them down into some digital citizen identity, some digital me. Why is this important now? It used to be a game for dating, and I understand why that was kind of gross and silly to all of us, but now it's a serious business tool. Do you know that more people sleep in Airbnbs than all hotel chains in the world combined? So more heads in beds every night than all hotel chains in the world combined. And Airbnb, you cannot rent an Airbnb without a Facebook profile. Why do you need a Facebook profile to rent an Airbnb? They need to know that you have a reputation to sustain, that you're not some rando renting my house, that there are people connected to you that believe in you, you went to school with people. If you cannot rent a room from the largest rental property organization in the world without a Facebook profile, I think you're acknowledging the truth here, which is that your digital identity supersedes your physical identity. Raise your hand if you've done a Google search of someone's name before hiring them. Look, almost 90% of the room does an internet search before hiring somebody. Do you see what I'm talking about? Do you see how we take all the things that we are and we filter them through some insecurity filters down to some digital identity? Well, we are just at the brink of this. If you have an Internet of Things piece of technology in your home, like a thermostat, like a Nest thermostat, not only are we like 1.0 at this, it knows who you are. You come home and it's like, oh, Sasha prefers 71 degrees, and so the house turns over accordingly. Well, every single thing that's plugged into an outlet in the next 3 years is going to have an internet address. Well, who are you in that system? You're going to need a digital key. That digital key is your identity. That identity is yours to manage. The reason this is fascinating is because we never had a personal broadcast like this before. I mean, every one of us has exactly the same power. That's impressive, because it used to be only the wealthy that had the power to broadcast. So my first assertion here is that in the midst of this greatest age of social change yet, how we exist is different now. We're primarily digital citizens, digital identities. We're only secondarily organic physical beings. Let that gross you out. Acknowledge that more people are getting married from dating apps than all religious community facilitated dating things combined. Talk to any cleric and they will tell you 51% of the marriages they conduct, those people met through digital platforms. Can you be on whatever these swipe right apps are without a Facebook profile? No. Why do they need you to have a public-facing identity? Because they're not going to pair you with someone if you can lie about yourself. We want to see that there's validation for this digital citizen character. All right, good. I'm going to move a little faster now that you understand what I'm talking about. I'm going to move up this spectrum. So I said we're at the midst of the greatest age of social change yet. Oh my gosh, lucky to be alive. In this era, we are primarily digital beings. Okay, what else do we know? Well, we also know that the way we learn is different. I'll give you a really good example. Many of us are old enough to remember using the Dewey Decimal System to get a book out of the library to write an essay. And you remember that book, that 30-year-old book off of that shelf, was our primary source of insight? That single book. I've been a professor for 11 years. Can you imagine if I accepted an MBA's final paper and it had one book as a reference? We laugh because that's ridiculous, yet all of us graduated with those mechanisms. Now, we're permanent learners. In fact, it's like dynamic learning. When we're on our phone, if you ask us what we think we're doing, we will tell you we think we're learning. Oh, we're learning about where to travel. We're learning about what to buy. We're learning about what to eat. And not only this, it is empowering to permanently learn. I have a woman who works with me. She's worked with me for about 7 years now. She has never not been in school. And when I say never not been in school, I'm not saying she takes off half time to go get a master's degree. Like this weekend, she's at this conference and listening to speakers. Next weekend, she's doing an online course. She'll bring an article into the business meetings and teach everyone about it. Well, it used to be her alone 7 years ago. Now this is the default status of my staff. Everyone is in this permanent insight collection process. I'll give you an example. Remember, you and I would get a degree from a university, and that was the end of our primary education. No. That coworker of yours, she's not only doing continuing education, she's reading at home, she's taking an online class, she subscribes to industry publications, her work experience compounds on top of the online forums where she shares insights. You see that whether she has 1, 2, 3, 10 of these assets, this is permanent learning. Well, that is changing how consumers live, think, act, reproduce, you name it. If we as business leaders ignore this fact that our consumer believes that learning is their priority, then we're ineffectively servicing them. And I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. But remember, how we learn is fundamentally different now. Cool. What else do we know? Well, the things we know about ourselves as individuals, I hope it shocks you. For example, raise your hand if you have done 23andMe and mapped your your genome, like where you come from and what you're made of. Raise your hand. Okay, 5 of us. The 5 of us are your first movers. The rest of you in 3 years, if you haven't mapped your genome, then you're ineffectively medicating yourself, ineffectively hydrating yourself, ineffectively reproducing. You are just guessing at these life-defining choices. The rest of us are trying to get ahead of this. We want to know our genetic makeup, but you know what else we want to know? We also want to take personality tests to know how our psyches work so we can collaborate with our coworkers. Raise your hand if you've taken a personality test. Look at the room, you guys. Look at how many people now know that thank you for your hands. They now know how they think, how they act, that they're part of a certain kind of psychological profile, and that makes them better at their job. It makes you better at working with them, right? So we not only can understand how we're genetically made up, but we can know how we're psychologically made up. This is transformative insight. It's not only transformative insight, people are expecting this. If you have a Apple Watch or a Fitbit or anything else that is tracking your heart rate, your calories, and or your movements, raise your hand. You guys, people didn't wear these things 2 years ago. Look at how many people in this room are daily indexing their physical behaviors. And any of us who have worn these devices, has it changed how we act? It sure has. We feel guilty when we haven't got our certain steps. You know, someone else beats us, we like text them, you know. Amazing how this, I'm glad that you agree, this know thyself data fundamentally changing how people sleep, right? Doesn't your Apple Watch tell you about your sleep patterns and change how you think about yourself? I met someone at breakfast this morning, guys who founded Sleepbox, I think it's called. It's one of these small rooms, yeah? Well, we know, I'm telling you as a business, we know how important sleep is, and we know our individual sleep patterns, and that might affect the way we buy. Well, my point is simply this. Remember, we are at 1.0 of these eras, and we know more about ourselves than any human has ever known, and it's available to all of us. This is going to change what you eat, where you live, all these life-defining characteristics. And remember, we're just getting started. When I say just getting started, I want to give you an example so that you can reference this every time you have doubt about the change. So like I brought up 3D printing earlier, and some of you say, that's for kids. They want to print like a dinosaur. I hear you. But in China, they're printing buildings, multi-tenant apartment complexes with a 3D printer. What does that mean? For those of you who work with carriers, those carriers are going to lose money on cargo. You know why? Because we are not going to ship large physical goods anymore. It's too cost prohibitive. Pipes, big timber, no. We're going to 3D print that stuff on site. Not only are we 3D printing buildings in China that have a durability of 100 years with no repairs necessary, I mean, that should blow your mind, but we're also 3D printing human tissue. Remember, we're just getting started, right? There's not a 3D printing facility on every corner like there was at Kinko's years ago. There will be, remember me next year when there's a 3D printing facility down the street. We are just getting started with 3D printing and we're already printing human tissue. Remember, this is the greatest age of social change yet. We're lucky to be alive in it, but recognize these changes are happening now. And we, as business leaders, must absorb the change. Okay, good. So know thyself data. We can know more about our being, more about who we are, what we love, what we connect with, what things we need for our body, and that's changing how we consume. Ladies in the room, raise your hand if you have used the site Stitch Fix. Okay, 10 of us. Stitch Fix measures your body. Every one of our bodies is unique. There's not a perfect human form. And not only that, but certain products only fit certain body types. And anybody who's ever gone and tried something on and walked out feeling shitty, you and me too, okay? It's not fair to us. The problem was that the product wasn't designed for my length of leg or the size of my chest, and that's the problem here, is that you feel stupid or like a bad consumer or your body is broken because their standard small, medium, and large don't fit you. Is that good customer service? It's not. People want to feel loved by the brands that they engage. They want to feel welcomed by the brands that they engage. Stitch Fix didn't exist 3 years ago and is now challenging the largest Nordstroms and everyone else because when you embed yourself in the Stitch Fix business, all your measurements, your body mass index, all the things that make you unique, they index that against warehouses of millions of product to send you only things that fit your unique body. It's innovative, it's new, but it will change how you shop. Walking into a store and knowing nothing, having a salesperson sell hard at you, having to buy stuff that doesn't really fit perfectly when you get home, gone, because we now know more about our physical, mental, social selves than any human has ever known in history. Remember, we're just getting started. Cool, what else do we know? Well, we know less. Well, not less. Let me give you an example. Another poll, ready? Listen to me here. If you know 10 phone numbers by heart, raise your hand. Ha. Look at all you nerds. Okay, so that is a feat. That is a feat. And not only is it a feat, the ones of you who don't remember were like, that's so lame. Why do I need to remember phone numbers anymore? I got this thing. It remembers them for me. Like, the people who didn't raise their hands, I know you don't know your spouse's phone number by heart, because I don't know my spouse's phone number by heart either. Well, is that a problem? It was a problem when you needed phone numbers in case of an emergency, and then you'd go to these things that were called phone booths, and then you'd put like a metal device that represents currency in a crevice, and that would enable you to connect. The thing that is leading this charge is something that you see in every one of your airport properties all over the world. And what is that? The cloud. The cloud. The cloud is every business's answer to whatever's happening in technology. And love it or hate it, acknowledge that all a cloud is your stuff on someone else's computer elsewhere. But, IBM to Twitter are like, the cloud. All right, what's my point in this learning with you? Remember that humans are different now. We no longer burden ourselves with remembering anything. That resource that we used to apply to remembering, we apply now to creating. Let me give you another example. If you used to take a lot of photographs 20 or 30 years ago, and God forbid your house was on fire, what did you run in after you saved your family? You ran in to get the photo albums. I see some smiles. Who's running into a fire to get their photo albums now? You're like, they're backed up on the cloud, so no problem. Well, that's amazing. It's amazing that all your business documents, my computer crashed as I was trying to come up here and load this thing. Did I even skip a beat? I was like, oh, I'll just ring up the cloud. All right, what is this doing to us as human beings? It's giving us the power to not know. Like with mapping technologies. I used to, when I'd come to conferences like this, I'd have maybe you guys don't know what a paper map is with a magnetic compass. Yeah, some of us smiling in the room, we're in Boy Scouts, we learned how to use these things, or Girl Scouts. Some of you have never used a magnetic compass. And not only that, I used to have to know what it took to get to the Hyatt that was in New Orleans. I land and I'm like, app this and app that. Well, that has given me the power to not know the freeways in New Orleans, not know the address of the property I'm attending. And you can think that that's silly and weak and disgusting, but imagine if I'm using that comprehension for other things. Your consumer has been changed because they don't have to remember things anymore. They're accustomed to finding out the answer only when they need it. All right, stick with me. You can hate it, but acknowledge that you are a part of this. Many of us are backed up in the cloud. Many of us have relinquished the burden of remembering how to get anywhere because we have our tools. Okay? Well, you saw this happen with your ticket on an airplane. I don't need to remember where it was. I don't have to go to a travel agent to go pick it up. In fact, sometimes I'll lose it and I'll pull it up again. In line, off the cloud, All right, changing human behavior permanently. Cool. Let's keep this charge and get to one of the most common questions I get these days, which is, how do I sell to millennials? I don't know a millennial that self-identifies as like, oh yes, I'm Ramon, I'm a millennial. It's just not how people behave. And not only is it not how people behave, as a marketer, I'm here to tell you, someone made up the term millennial to sell you advertising. They came to you and said, oh, there's these new people, and if you don't market to them, you're gonna lose. There have always been new people, okay, just so you're real clear. And not only have there always been new people, remember when there was this generation, they called them the greatest generation, the post-war generation? Those were 20-year periods in history, 20 years. Why did they take 20 years to define a generation? Because that was about how long it took for new ideologies, new lifestyle practice to embed themselves into that society. So when you and I were young, a generation was 20 years. All right, let's go to 1980 and identify Gen X. Okay, so we had Gen X. So we're moving through the 80s, we're like, yeah, Gen X. And then someone was like, oh, but Gen Y. And we're like, okay, fine. So we've kind of got this Venn diagram going on here of X and Y. Then some marketer was like, ring-a-ding-ding, what about the millennials? And you're like, well, are they also Gen Y? And then Ernst & Young, EY, reports that in 2016, they hired more people than they ever have in history, and every single one of them is Gen Z. And I'm like, well, what happens after Z? And not only that, but well, where do X and Y and millennial and Z, where do they stop? Where do they start? Well, as my assertion conveys here, there is no line. And not only is there no line, we know from global consumer behavior data that people plus 45 are some of the fastest, most proactive users of social media in history. So don't tell me I need to be in social channels to advertise because the children's. This assertion that you could kind of delineate people by the year that they were born, are you the year you were born? Is that who you are? Is that the primary definer of what you like in life? Not only is it not, you and I are equal now no matter what year we were born because of the tools, because of these practices, because of these philosophies. So what we saw from this Google analysis globally was to say millennial, born in these years, we're gonna sell to them in this way is so short-sighted, it's bad for business. What we really have to ask ourselves is, who is the audience and how do they engage? Those are the questions. Who is the audience, and how do they engage? When I say the audience is a select group of people who are likely to participate in what you offer. Not everybody, not all things to all people. No wasted energy talking to audiences that do not frequent airports. Don't waste that energy trying to make yourself feel good about your business talking to people who have no chance of using it. Unfortunately, that was how marketers used to spend, because the executive would want to see a billboard of their brand in that city to feel good that they were marketing themselves. We now know that's not only a waste, people don't remember that stuff. They don't remember that which is not relevant to them. So my assertion is, stop asking yourselves how you can engage millennials. Assess who the audience is on property, wherever that might be, and then evaluate how they engage. Where they engage, how they engage, that should define how you market. Well, if we're not millennials, and we're not Gen X, and we're not Gen Y, what are we? And this is where me, Sasha, my personal beliefs come. As a world traveler my entire life, my father was in the Navy and a physician, and so he taught and worked for the Navy all over the world, and I got to go with him. And I've continued that journey as a professional. And I'm here to report that whatever the news is telling us about the world is not going to shit, okay? Most of what I witness, what you and I witness is beautiful, good stuff, great stuff everywhere. Why does the news only talk about bad stuff? Because humans can't look away from it. Like when there's an accident on the freeway and you're late for your plane and you still slow down. That's why you turn on the news any night on any channel, and what is it? Death, doom, and destruction. Death. Why? Because even though it makes you feel gross, you can't look away. You know the most profitable time in news broadcasts? Most profitable time in news broadcasts are car chases, because people can't look away. Well, are there car chases in every city every day? No, but the news media sure makes us think that that's the case. The reason why they're telling you that the world is falling apart is because it's good for business for them. I'm a human being, you are a human being. I'm here to tell you the world is magnificent. The people on this planet do love. There are, of course, anomaly voices that are trying to destroy morale, but net, there's never been more peace on this planet. There have never been fewer wars. Fewer people die in war now than ever in history, and we have more people now. Not only this, we are becoming global citizens. We are multicultural, multi-faith, really concerning ourselves with global communities. I'm extremely excited to get to participate in this. And instead of us saying, what generation are you? I would like to anoint us the hero gen. The hero generation. The generation that might have the opportunity to change the world's perception of self and motivate the people above us and below us to care, to believe that local and international travel is good for the heart and the mind. That travel builds families, grows businesses, connects communities. We have to believe it. And in fact, if you're the leader of your enterprise, throw away your CEO title, your managing director title. You're the chief believer. You're the one who believes the most. Well, I believe that if you and I want to, we can not only change the future, we can give people something to believe in. I'm going to assert that this connected and engaged era of humanity could possibly be the hero generation. I audited this in Asia, all over South America, and in Europe, and it turns out it even works better there. In Japan, they call it Hirogen. In Argentina, they call it Henherue. But the point is, we as Americans are skeptical, we're kind of judging these assertions. No. In the rest of the world, they are not saying your age defines you. They're saying your behaviors define you. And not only your behaviors, but we can study those behaviors and engage you at the point of interest. How powerful. But of course, like all great stories, whether those are King Arthur tales or Viking sagas or the Upanishads, you pick your story, and it's built like this. We'll get you to this place where you can believe that the future is amazing or that life in this practice are amazing, but you're sitting back saying, all right, Sasha, thank you for this rant, but there are things that are getting in the way, and I totally agree. In fact, let me show you what the data said. The first thing that the data said was that consumer behavior, like Ramon said at my intro, has changed. And not only has it changed because their psychology has changed. Their psychology shifted from this, where you and I, gosh, you remember these days? You can walk into the airport, you can walk up to that counter, and that ticketing agent had full control over brokering that flight's tickets. You walked in with your family because they took you to the gate. You remember those days, right? Well, you also remember the days when you would go to a car dealer, knowing nothing about the vehicle or the price, and that salesperson would take you from zero to sold in a single moment, in a single experience, and you would get sold to and overwhelmed. Those of you who bought a car in the last 3 years, you walk into that dealer, you're like, I know exactly how much you paid. I know how much the other dealers in the neighborhood are selling it for, and if you don't treat me right, I'm gonna call them right now. Isn't that you? Well, not only is that you have access to the insights that could inform that sales pitch, that I know pitch. Well, not only do you have those insights, you can't imagine life without them now. Do you want to be sold to? Do you want someone to take you from 0 to 100 in a transaction after never knowing them or caring about them? Well, not only do you not want to do this, we have found out that even when it comes to faith, healthcare, or consumer packaged goods at the register, the consumer is expecting, on average, 7 to 10 brand exposures, 7 to 10 touch points before transaction. What does 7 to 10 touch points equal? A tweet counts as a touch point. A billboard, a touch point. An email newsletter, a touch point. An Instagram photo, a touch point. Small devices, huge impact when they are related, when there's 6, 5, 10 assets that drive a story. So not only do we understand this when it comes to consumer packaged goods, where the consumer is primarily digital, this is affecting how people choose travel destinations. You've all been there, right? You kind of do a little search on your computer, you're watching something on television, you have a conversation with a friend, then you do a mobile search while in the line at the grocery store. This is you, right? Yeah, I see some smiles, okay. Then you're watching television, but you also have a tablet open, so you're kind of second braining it, okay? Well, then you might walk into a store, but do you buy there? No, you learn there. And then you go somewhere else or go online and transact. Well, each of these touch points adds up to an understanding and a relationship in your psyche. So your audience is not waiting for that pop-up ad the minute they type in vacation in city. They want to have heard of you, noticed your partnerships, seen your employees proud of where they work on Glassdoor.com or some other destination. But you get this because you're a consumer too. You do not want a one-night brand stand. You don't want a brand to show up, shock you into buying, and then never talk to you or engage you again. You want a relationship. And not only do you want a relationship, you want to know that who you're buying from can be trusted. And what does trust mean? It means they've got audiences that are engaged and curious and represent them. So consider that your passengers, your buyers, are not only not waiting around to hear from you, you don't get one email to close the deal. Just like coming to this conference was probably the third or fourth time you talked to that person, and then you're going to email them when you get home, and then you're going to negotiate the deal in touch point 7, and touch point 10 is the opening of the new storefront in that airport. So consider that your audience, B2B buyer or citizen, needs 7 to 10 stimuli to feel connected enough to buy and engage a brand. What else do we know about the consumer shift in psychology? I come from a neighborhood in Los Angeles that you've never heard of, so I won't bring it up, but it's right next to Hollywood. Everybody heard of Hollywood? Okay, a lot of heads nodding. Do you know that Hollywood is not a real place? It is a circle drawn on the map by the entertainment industry to tell you where they do their work. So I said Hollywood, and all of you were like, oh, they've got a police department and plumbing. No, they don't have any of those things. In fact, their perception is so well governed that we think that most content comes from Hollywood. Bollywood, India produces far more content than Hollywood, California. And remember that when Hollywood was king, it was because they had the capital and the technology. And now every single person in this room has a device that has more processing power than all the technology used to land on the moon in the 70s. Do you understand? Remember, Houston, we got a problem? Remember all those computers? Right here. Amazing, right? Okay, so your audience, which was accustomed to, oh, remember the days where at midnight when you snuck in to watch television and there was nothing on? Remember the color bars or the snow? Do you know that default cable in the United States now comes with 400 always-on channels? 400. Always on. There's no limit to the amount of content. And not only that, is the content only originating behind expensive cameras? No, your phone camera is better, has higher quality imagery than any big expensive videotape camera in the 80s. So what was a small industry's ownership of content creation has been distributed not only all over the world, and not just American, but the content is being created all day, every day. More content is uploaded to YouTube in a single day than the US government has in its archives. You know, the US archives, the Library of Congress and such. More data every day uploaded to YouTube than the entire index of the US history and commerce history. But my point is this. There used to be a term called 24/7. I don't know what's bigger than that, so I'll call it 25/8. Your audience is getting distracted and stimulated by content created all over the world, cross-device, omni-channel, not just tablet, not just television, not just smartphone, but all of those devices are now creating and sharing content. Wow, that's a lot. Can you absorb all that? Can you get through that cacophony? You can't. You need help. Well, not only can you not, but the organizations that have primarily been communicating, they remember the old days. They remember the Dewey Decimal System. They remember those days where if a consumer had a complaint, what did you do? Write a letter to the Better Business Bureau and hope that some intern opened the envelope and did something about it? Now, if someone doesn't treat you right, you're like, oh, hell no. I'm gonna tell everybody. Well, not only are you telling everybody, that is power and control and influence, right? Well, again, I'm gonna go back one doodle here. That 25/8 broadcast means that if you're going to engage your audience, you better be relevant. You better be right. You better be in their format, in their tone of voice. Because this audience, again, is unlike all the consumers you and I remember. Not only are they unlike all those consumers that you and I remember, they were raised gaming. I know you hate the word gaming or gamification. I just want you to process that even if you grew up playing cricket or baseball or World of Warcraft, the same thing is happening. Elaborate environments, interesting rules, competitors and teammates, costumes, referees, whether it's massive online role-playing games like Warcraft, where right now, 10 million people are playing. Right now, 10 million people at the same time. Or you're on the cricket pitch. Gaming is incredibly stimulating. It fills the mind, distracts the body, gives you problem-solving opportunities. I put this out here for you because whenever we hear about terrorist behavior, what does the news say? Oh, they were brainwashed. They were brainwashed. Look, we have IBM Watson, which is supposed to be the smartest computer in history. It cannot compete with the human brain. The human brain is the most powerful processing engine we will ever know, at least for the next 10 years. And not only that, it doesn't need to have anything washed out of it. It needs to be filled. Mind-filling content works. It engages the heart and engages the mind. And this is what you seek. This is what you want. That's why your passengers are sitting there sucking down content on their mobile phone. They want their minds filled. They don't need to move anything out to put stuff in. And not only do they expect that, remember that they grew up in these gaming environments. What did gaming mean? When you are learning to play cricket, how many times do you fail? I mean, any of us who played any sport, you're failing like all day. And not only are you failing all day, but in the video games, that's par for the course. All right, I just want to point something out here. That when you and I failed 20 years ago, our bosses and our families pushed us away. They were like, don't you talk about that failure. Do you know that in the Silicon Valley now there's a conference called FailCon? In fact, what happens if next year you guys don't talk about how successful you are, you come back and teach each other about something you tried that didn't work? Who'd come back to that, right? Well, amazingly enough, we don't love to hear about how perfect people are. We want to know that they're human like you and I are human. And so this concept of failure practiced is embedded in their psyche. Anybody know anyone who's perfect? I never met anybody who's perfect. Every one of us learned from these failures. And not only that, but my graduate students, they come into class with a concept called fail fast, fail often, which is the key to innovation. As those permissions to try, rectify, and build. So if your consumer is accustomed to being allowed to make mistakes, then instead of them being confronted by those mistakes, how about we support those mistakes? And not only support them, but use them to learn how we can better guide. Like, for example, when it comes to wayfinding in airports, usually designed by the people who built the property, and so they know where everything is. I'm telling you right now, the wayfinding was not built for me running from terminal to terminal. All right, well, that means that the wayfinding leaders, they expect me to never fail. They expect me to know exactly what train and exactly what terminal. You are all on the receiving end. That's not fair. It's not fair at all, because I take the stress on myself and I feel bad about my planning or my ticket purchasing. Remember that your audience was raised in fail-practiced experiences, whether that was the baseball field or a gaming environment, and that means they want permission to make a mistake. Like when I go through TSA and I forgot that I put my laptop in there and they lambast me, they out me. I have to stand over here, someone's got to put blue gloves on and touch me places that I don't even touch myself. Is that a way to treat someone who didn't make a mistake on purpose? They're just trying to understand what it means to travel? You know what I'm talking about and you know the difference. Your audience grew up with the permission to fail. Enable that. Enable that permission, because the truth is, who lets them fail and helps them succeed, they will never forget. I was watching on television last night, Shaquille O'Neal was meeting with his Louisiana State coach, loving him, supporting him. And what did he thank the coach for? Letting him fail and helping him learn through those failures. So, your audience not only expects mind-filling experiences, but they want the right to make a mistake and not feel bad about it. I'll touch on this last piece because you're an international audience and so you'll get it. If we used to primarily be physical beings and now we're primarily digital beings, how are we managing our relationships with family and friends? Well, if you look at any of our Facebook profile photos, we do not look that good every day. Really? Well, that's the point, is you put your best self forward and you capture that best self, like an actor who has a profile shot. Well, in this era, we call that an avatar, a manifestation of your character. Well, when you put on that soccer jersey as a kid, that wasn't who you were every day, that was a character form. When you took that soccer photo, character form. Okay, the point is that your audience is so accustomed to managing their identities in other nations like Japan, if you don't have an avatar on your business card, you are not a legitimate business. That kind of, well, who could you be? What superhero would you be? If you could help, what would you do? That concept of belief and self and that pride is innate in these individuals because their name was on the back of their jersey or their character in that video game they played for 7 years and built an emotional attachment to. Remember, your audience is not only accustomed to 25/8 content, they were raised in mind-filling experiences. They were accustomed to being able to broadcast their identity and make mistakes with it. Long tangent, but worth recognizing that if you are building a retail experience that is not mind-filling or doesn't enable the audience to fill their mind, you are understimulating. You're under-engaging. I'll show you more about this shortly. All right, next step on this journey, remember I'm on the map and I'm trying to bring you down into the valley of darkness. And I still told you that, oh my gosh, our consumer, they've got 7 to 10 stimuli they needed and they were raised with gaming and they've got content 25/8. That's a lot for you, I agree. Well, the real backbreaker is that 11 years ago when I asserted something in my classrooms to my MBAs, you know what they said? Yes, okay, sir, you know. Do you know what they do now? They get the Googleizer out, and the whole time, 4 hours of lecture, they're like, no, Professor Strauss, that's not right, no, calling me out on every single assertion I make. And I love it, by the way, it makes me better at my job. But the point is, 20 years ago, if you had a question, where did you go get the answer? You turn to some person, like let's say you're trying to learn about God. You would turn to somebody in your family or in your community and be like, what is God? Who is she? What does she do? Why is she here? And you didn't have the resources or the permission to ask an open-ended question. An open-ended question with no repercussions. How empowering is that? In fact, there's a phrase amongst the youth called, they say, we don't know nothing. That grammatically incorrect statement is right. There's nothing that they don't think they know. In fact, ask someone who's 9-year-old a question, how tall is the Eiffel Tower? And they're gonna look at you like, I don't wanna know, so I don't know, but if I wanna know, I'm gonna find out right now. Like, stop asking me stupid questions. And on top of this, if you had a math question when you were young, do you remember like groveling at some older person and be like, please? And they weren't even good at math. And they were the way. If anybody has a child who's 9 years old and they're doing math homework, it's way beyond what you're capable of. And when they have a question, they turn to a website called Khan Academy, K-A-H-N Academy. I promise you, no matter what the topic you failed, calculus, chemistry, you will understand it in an hour and a half, and you'll be able to teach it. Because the learning practice was built for contemporary consumer psychology, not the era where you and I would sit at the same cold metal desk for 8 hours learning. So if your audience is not only permanent learners and they expect dynamic education, they were given the power to ask about virtually anything without repercussion. Whereas when you asked, how does that tire work, you used to get judgment. Someone would be like, oh, you don't know, or I can't believe you don't remember. Now, every one of your citizens, when they don't know something, they have the power to ask. That's huge, but that's scary. Because what if they're asking, where should I go, or what should I buy, and you are not there to answer? I'm gonna come back to that in a second. But remember that. The consumer, when they don't know, they don't turn to their right or left. They look down. And they ask without repercussion. What happens when the internet as a whole does not have the answer? Do they give up? Are they done? No. They turn to what I would call their identity index, which is a collection of every single human being they ever met. Some of us in the room are old enough to feel like if we have a friend from kindergarten, that was impressive to be able to stay in relation to them for this many years. I'm sorry, you guys. Do you realize that after this conference, the way you and I are going to stay connected is not through a business card? We're going to find each other on LinkedIn, and in 3 years, when I have a question about whatever your category is, I can reach out directly like we saw each other yesterday. Well, all my graduate students who tend to be under the age of 50, every single one of them has a permanent index of every person they went to business school with, everyone they were in that Model United Nations club with, everyone they met on an airplane, every single human being that ever meant anything to them, they have a permanent, lifelong channel of access. The number one request from Facebook is a feature you are now seeing called recommendations, where someone says, taking the family on a vacation in the summer, where should we go? And they post that to Facebook and ask for responses. This was Facebook's number one priority this year. Why? Because when we don't know and the internet doesn't answer us, we turn to the people that we've met and we ask them. So take a deep breath, because this is hairy. This is really big, that your consumer needs 7 to 10 distractions and their minds need to be filled, and if they don't have an answer, they can ask, and if there is no answer, they can ask their friends and family. This is crazy, intense. But you're here because you believe in the growth of your business. I am here because I believe in the growth of our business, and I want you to recognize that if we get smart about this, we can win. Not only win, but create something that's never been created before. I'm going to remind you, we're at the greatest age of social change yet. 3D printing, artificial intelligence, big data, social media. I mean, wow. We exist digitally. We learn permanently. We know more about ourselves than we ever could have imagined. We have the power to forget anything. We are not defined by the year that we were born. We're defined by how we engage. Let us be the hero generation. Let us be the generation that doesn't ensconce this world in death, doom, and destruction. But it's not going to be easy. Our audience has an evolved psyche. We have digital indexes that prove this globally across cultures and faiths. The consumer is accustomed to content that stimulates them all day and all night. That's why, even though I tried to turn off the television in the back of the seat on my airplane, I can't. On top of this, we were raised in extremely stimulating environments. If we ever had a question, we could ask, and if there wasn't an answer, we can turn to the people we trust. Now, this is where the deep sigh comes in, because you and I have to meet these challenges and participate. We want to not beat the odds. We want to win with these people by our sides. We want to engage this generation. We want them to be our advocates and buyers. So how are we going to engage the hero generation? Well, I'm not going to use my opinion. I'm going to show you what we found out through our global analysis with Google's access to consumer behavior. The 4 things that came out of that analysis are right here. The buy moments, the learn moments, the express moments, and the live moments. Let me talk about each of these, and then I'll be done, and I'll be available to answer questions if you like. So let's start with the first thing. The buy moments are the situation where the consumer has a burden that they need a solution for immediately. What does this look like? It ends up showing up less than 5% of the time. Sorry, didn't mean to get in the way of your photo there. 5% of the time. 5% of the time, the consumer is ready to buy. You, 5% of the time, are ready to buy. You search for a plane ticket because you need to get to that event tomorrow morning. You almost will forego your brand allegiances for that immediate solution. You're running through the airport and your flight's about to take off, and you prefer coffee brand A, but in that moment, that pinch, that buy moment, you'll take whatever's available. Remember, it's less than 5% of the time, and again, we have evidence for this. But just in your psyche, remember that there's very little brand allegiance in the buy moment. What that does to you and I is that we run to beat people on price, or we want to be the loudest marketer so that when the consumer is ready to buy, we're standing there. Well, I just want to point out when this happens. It happens when the consumer experiences an inconvenience and they need a solution, or they've been in the midst of an enduring problem and they finally have given up and are ready to solve. These buy moments translate to this when it comes to us as business leaders. Be there when they're ready to buy. What does be there when they're ready to buy mean? That means something like, SEO, search engine optimization. You can forget everything I've said today. If you want one piece of branding advice, go find out what SEO is, search engine optimization. There's plenty of books and there's plenty of people who will advise you for free. This is how it works. When a consumer shows up on the internet and says, I want, I need, I am looking for, the internet does not know what the answer should be. So what does the internet do? It searches. It's called spidering. It indexes what the web has to offer, what your website's content looks like, and then it puts it into the archive so people can find it. Well, what happens when you are not there when I search? I don't even know that you exist. People don't buy what they don't know exists. So here we are in the buy moment where your consumer will spend, but you need to be there when they're ready to transact. Another perfect example of this are digital transaction platforms. For example, if you don't have a credit card reader, what does that do to your transactions? If you've got Apple Pay or Google Pay, don't you see a different confluence of buyers? How about Starbucks with their membership program? I mean, amazing how the app has driven consumer behavior. What they said was, does the world need an app? No. When's the consumer buying, and how do we make sure that when they're ready to buy, we are there enabling the transaction? So let's call that the buy moments, and it's only about 5% of the time. Well, what do people think that they're doing the rest of the time? Even though they might still be shopping or reading, what they believe is happening is learning. Where should I take my family for vacation? I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn about where I should go and what should I do when I'm there. The reason why this is important is because of what I showed you earlier, that consumers now believe they have the right to learn permanently, and the brands that teach them build indelible connections, permanent connections to where we have learned. Like you and your alma mater and your little license plate frame. Yeah, I know you, okay? What is that? Other than you feeling connected to that which grew you. The brands that are really thriving in this era are teaching, not selling. Teach, don't sell. Teach, don't sell means that your consumer isn't ready to buy, they're ready to understand. And if you are how they come to understand, they will not look to competitor solutions. They will align themselves with you. Teach, don't sell used to just be a goodwill philosophy. Now it's breadwinning philosophy. It drives transactions because the consumer will go right to the source of learning rather than turning to the index on the internet to try and find their solution. There's two types of learnings I want to give you so that you can understand the difference between them, but they're both very, very valuable. So I want to give you one example. There's a client of ours called Johnson & Johnson. You know them as a healthcare company. And they know that it's hard for you to buy healthcare product knowing nothing. You're really scared of it. So they created a website, and any parent in the room will know it, called Baby Center. Babycenter.com. Okay, it breaks down the process of having a baby down to every single week. And as a parent, it's amazing because you really get the insight you need. Well, do they charge us to use babycenter.com? No. Johnson & Johnson understands that if they provide the environment for you to learn, you will turn to them first. Just like Ramon and everyone at ARN understands that if you come to a conference to learn, you'll stay connected to their business. But when I say learn, two versions. Johnson & Johnson's website, babycenter.com, they hire bloggers, they ask guest writers, they build conversation, but they're providing the place. They're providing the place, the where learning happens, which is holy in its own right. But there's another level up, which I think you already know, which is to actually be why the learning is happening. Go to any Home Depot or Lowe's or any big box home retailer, and you will see that all of you understand that where there's foot traffic, there's money. Well, what do they put in their primary foot traffic area at the front of a Home Depot? A classroom. a space where you can use the tools, bring your child and build a birdhouse for free? Is Home Depot selling you the wood or the glue or the drill in that moment? They don't even tell you the price. They know that if some organization is the reason why you learned how to do something, that's where you will buy. And no price discount at the store across the street is going to change that behavior. So the highest cause in this era is not to be there in the buy moments, which is important, but that's 5% of the time. 70% of the time, the consumer believes that they are learning while on the internet, and the brands that are teaching them are the ones that they build permanent, indelible, trusted, ongoing, advocacy-based relationships with. Cool. What happens beyond the buy moment, beyond the learn moments? The third highest rung of the ladder are called the express moments. Anybody raised in East Asia will tell you that when it comes to whether it's Buddhism or Japanese identity or Singaporean identity, you don't brag about yourself. We're all even, we're all one, we're all God, we're all part of this universe. And so their philosophy says, don't self-express, don't ego drive. Well, in America, we're like, ego first, you know? And it's interesting because it's actually not only been good for business, but the rest of the world has learned from it and tapered it down a little bit. And what it really came down to was this, that I, as an organism, have a hard time explaining to you who I am and what I believe. But if I tell you, I went to this school, I like this band, I like this sports team, I work in this category, immediately you can get a sense of who I am from that exposure. Well, consumers want this power so badly, they want to be understood so badly that we are in the midst of the era of mass self-expression, mass personal broadcasting. Every editor of every paper has a public-facing identity that is their primary channel for communication. Whether it's the president or a citizen, every single individual has the power to broadcast, but the problem is we need help explaining who we are and what we believe. And that's why this is not only the era of self-expression, this is where the brand becomes the mechanism for self-expression. What does self-expression, other than me helping another human know me better? By simplifying our understanding of one another. A really good example of self-expression assistance are these certification programs, these badging and certification programs that help your employees or you be better at a category. The classic example is Microsoft certification, but now you can be Google AdWords certified, you can be consumer retail certified. There's plenty of examples of this. But what do you do with that certification? Do you kind of put it in a drawer and never talk about it? No, you put that right on your little resume, don't you? You put it there on your LinkedIn profile so that people know what you are. Well, the brands that help you self-express win in the era of self-expression. I'll tell you where this matters to you. Whether you are a product developer or airport operator, you got to respect that you're in the real estate sphere, where you've got property and experiences that people are touching. The hotel industry had a conference a few weeks ago that I keynote spoke at, and I found something fascinating. There were the classic hoteliers who remembered the way that it was and were fighting hard to keep it the way that it was. And then there was a really interesting group of boutique hotels who figured out something really fascinating, that we like taking selfies. Not only, and by the way, global phenomenon, this is not an American thing. My clients in Malaysia, they call it Wi-Fis because they usually take a group shot, fine. But the point is, we are capturing our moments and sharing those moments. So these boutique hotel chains are changing the layout and the artwork in their hotel rooms to optimize for selfies, so the consumer tags themselves and the location and pushes that to their entire network. Are you going to build a hotel room and not consider that now? Not only are you not going to consider it, but Many of the flyers that I'm sitting next to on the airline, they brag about their affiliations and their memberships to these communities. These brands say something about them as people. We're living in the era of self-expression. The consumer wants help explaining who they are, and the brands that enable them to self-celebrate or enable them to credential are not only winning, they're building advocates who on their own are promoting those brands, on their own are building customers. And we know the power of voice, we know the power of word of mouth, it's the most powerful marketing device in history. Well, if your consumers, or how about your employees, are self-expressing so that anytime anybody queries, boom, employee who's proud, boom, employee who wants to bring workers into the workforce, boom, investor who's proud to associate. Those types of self-expression are so validating, so concretizing, that no marketing campaign can match the power of a consumer's voice. This works in business-to-business enterprise software. It works in logistics. No category untouched by this. I'll prove it to you. Take any public-facing company and watch their executives in social media. Constantly building our identity, self-expressing why? To build validation for why they're the leader, to build validation for the people that are following them. We're living in the era of self-expression, and we have the tools to do so. Enable your audience to self-express, and you will win. Third and last rung of the ladder, and I'll wrap up with these two final points, which is that, again, 20 or 30 years ago, how you lived your life was defined by, well, what your faith told you you were supposed to do, and then what your community next door told you what you were supposed to do, and what your parents told you what you're supposed to do. So that was your sort of sphere of construct, of societal construct. Well, now you can be anything you want, and you can learn anything you want by going out and querying anything you want. But what's really interesting is that those religions, those corporations, those universities that used to be the primary definers of our character have now been demoted to the point where the most avid users of social media, what are they using it for? To tell stories about their lives, to explain where they've been and why they went there and what they want to do. Many of you who have young employees, they don't want a raise. They want time off to travel, to experience the world so they can tell people about it, so they can connect and relate as global citizens. Well, why is this important to you economically, not just socially? Well, there are plenty of competitors for your product. You know that. And if there's not a competitor today, there will be one tomorrow. So how do we ensure that this audience that we care so deeply about doesn't forget us? It turns out the answer is this. When a brand changes the way you live your life, you permanently associate that change with the brand. Religion figured this out thousands of years ago. They took a symbol, a name of a topic, some imagery, some stimuli. They used that construct to change how you treated your family, how you talked to your neighbors. Boom. The leader of that church, that synagogue, that mosque, that prayer hall can come and go. Yet the practice remains. Brands that are winning now not only understand that they need to be there in the buy moments, they need to help the consumer self-express. Every single one of them has a part of their business plan that talks about how they're changing the life of the consumer. I'll show you an example, and I'll open it up to the audience at questions. You can tell me your own stories of this, but I'll give you one poignant one. There's a retailer called Tom's Shoes. Yeah, many of you know it. For those of you who don't know it, it was founded by a person who knows nothing about shoes. He used to be in gaming porn, made a lot of money, felt bad about it, so he went on a backpacking trip in South America. As he was backpacking, he saw very poor people with very cheap shoes on their feet. And he says, I can sell those to hipsters in the United States for so much money. But he realized that the shoes were so low quality that you wouldn't dare pay $50 for them. So what he figured out was, if I sold you 2 pairs of shoes and gave away the second pair to some poor person in some foreign land, you would feel so good about it that you would tell your friends about your shoes. Well, not only do you tell your friends about your shoes, what we have seen happen is that the person who wears Tom's shoes, which has the philosophy of one for one, you buy one, we give one, that citizen is walking around like this. I believe in the world. I care about other people. I'm going to recycle today. It feels weird to you, but who was doing that work for them before? Who was inspiring to change the way they care for their parents or buy product? This mechanism of one for one was not invented by Tom's Shoes. It was marketed by Tom's Shoes. It was so successful that they took the word shoes out of their name, because now they sell coffee, glasses. If this was an average business model, we wouldn't be talking about it. But the third largest private equity firm in the world, Bain Capital, didn't buy Adidas, they didn't buy Nike, they just bought Tom's Shoes. The product is crappy. The value proposition of one for one, well, what happened to the poor shoe retailer in Nigeria who you just displaced by giving away free shoes? And what happens when these cheap shoes wear out? Do you supply them new ones? No, they go back to being barefoot? Even all that rationale does not dissuade the consumer. The consumer is walking around asking themselves, how am what I'm doing, how is the food that I'm eating, who else needs to eat that? This health care that I'm getting, who isn't getting that health care? This has changed the way that people live their life. Well, you have the same opportunity. Most airports now have communal prayer halls. I have kneeled before all faiths in the same place, praying at the same time. Gosh, I wish that was happening elsewhere, don't you? Not just in airports. I get to try food from cultures I knew not of and pride myself on those cultures when I land. I meet people from all walks of life and we're the same in the airport. Incredible what happens once we walk through security. One world. You, probably more than any other industry right now, have the greatest power to change the ways that humans live their lives. You have the channel, you have the environment, you have the psychology, you have the spending behaviors. Take classic retail. So I think Westfield is one of the sponsors of this event, right? Take a look at what they're doing in California right now in Culver City area, Century City. The mall environment is no longer about forcing someone into a box and getting them to transact. It's about open experiences that make people feel like this is where they want to spend their time. Well, Westfield is in the airport business too. And you understand that they know that changing the environment so that it's not functional, it's emotional and experiential, drives consumer behavior so they come to the airport earlier and don't hate it. And not only that, they don't cram food in their mouth at home. They leave early to relax, buy a coffee at the start of the line, walk through TSA, no sweat, get into the retailers, shop for their children, buy a magazine so they feel important about where they land, right? Don't you see that pattern behavior? Well, traditional retail, we know, is on a decline. Well, where is it not? Where is it not on a decline? And not only where is it not on a decline, where are the wealthiest, highest spenders spending hours waiting to be stimulated? Where they feel good spending their money, buying gifts, telling stories to bring home. In your place of business. So, I'll leave you with this ask. I want you to succeed as a business person. I really do. I want you to acknowledge that we are lucky to be alive at the greatest age of social change yet. Oh my gosh. We live differently now. We learn differently now. We think differently now. We act differently now. And that means we can be one group. But we're challenged by the realities of consumption and content and gaming and internet search and social media. But if we're here at this conference, we believe we can win and grow. So we have to engage this audience. How do we engage them? Well, if they're ready to buy, be there. Credit card transaction machines, app environments, you pick the transaction channel. If you can't be there when they buy, then the rest of this isn't worth the time. But if you can account for the moment that they're ready to transact, then let us fill their minds the rest of the time. Help them learn about the city where our store is located. Help them understand the communities. I saw a retailer on the trade shows downstairs where they're only selling books about the local communities and airports in a vending machine. Because people want these things. They want to understand. And if you are the conduits of learning, that will be their connection. Again, indelible connection. Remember though, teach, don't sell. I'll put this on you right now. Raise your hand if when you were young, you even knew that the airport industry was an industry. None of you. One of us. Isn't that a shame? Isn't this the coolest industry? Isn't it so neat how fast it's changing and how global it is in psychology? I'm asking every one of you 5 minutes a year to go some class in some town and you go teach those kids what it means to work in your category. Some of us remember when that happened when we were young and we saw that person in that classroom and it changed how we saw work because they loved their work. They were proud of their work like you are proud of your work. So, not only teach, don't sell, but teach what you know so you can empower the next group. Remember though, your citizen, your employees, your customer, they want to self-express. They need help self-expressing. If you don't have a LinkedIn group page for all of your employees, go build one. It's super cheap and easy to build. You will see you'll get more applicants for jobs. People will pride themselves on working for you, and that will affect your web traffic. Be there when your audience self-expresses. The last ask is to remind yourself that if your customer buys from you more than one time, you may in fact be affecting the way that they live their life. Know it, own it, guide it with grand intention. I'll leave you with this last comment. Many of my global CEO clients tell me about their younger staff and they're upset about it. Damn those kids. Damn their ADD, right? Damn their work ethic. I keep telling them what to do and they won't do it. You like that? Anybody in the room like to be told what to do? No. Okay, what do the other CEOs say? They say, damn you kids, follow me. Get over here. Do what I'm doing. Do the way I've always done it for the last 30 years, even though nothing is the same about our industry. They resent it because it's wrong. They don't want to lead you, and they don't want you leading them. They want to do it together with you. You and me, no, your age, that age, no. We have an audience. That audience is worth something to us. We should care deeply about them. How do you and I, despite our genetic origins, engage with Hero Gen? Not at, not to, with. I understand that this is a big ask. I respect that this is probably some gnarly insight as to how consumers are behaving. But I'm not giving this presentation to everybody. I'm giving it to you as it relates to your industry. You are now on the bleeding edge of understanding consumer psyche. You can be first mover. You can be first student. You can be the trendsetter. You can get investors and donors and advocates because you're the one in your category who most understands consumer psyche. I'll close with one retail example that should help you forever remember the change. One of the largest retailers in North America is called Target, or Target if you're a fashionista. And you know Target as, gosh, a building bigger than this room, right? And not only a building bigger than this room, but you think that what they're trying to get you to do is buy a piece of clothing and walk out. Target knows that's very short-sighted. They know that that customer is not a long-term return investment. So they did an audit without regret. And what they figured out was that their retail footprint, their stores, were only the third highest priority in their enterprise. Target, the retailer, the real estate was third. What was second? Desktop web. Okay, you get that, right? What was number one? Mobile. 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 Take your television, take your radio, take your car radio, take your VCR, do you guys still have one of those? Take all of those things and add them up. All of them together do not equate to the amount of time people are spending on their mobile device. If you do not have a mobile optimized website, get out of the airport business, please. Is your consumer walking around with a large television? If your website does not make the consumer who's mobile first feel welcomed, then they think of you as yesterday, the way it was, not the way that it is. A mobile optimized website, how much does it cost? Basically $0. You can use templated websites. There's plenty of examples, Wix.com, whatever. These websites, no code required. You fill in the blanks, the site goes live, it's search engine optimized, and no matter what screen, maximized for clarity and consumption on those devices. What is this doing? If the consumer wants to know, be there when they query, be there native to where they query so that they don't have to go off and come back, that ease of use means that you're considering the audience first. I'll leave you with that assertion. Ramon and I have made arrangements that I think there's a printout. Yeah, perfect. There's a printout of this map with also some touch point examples. Also, if you want to ask me a question, there's a contact form on that sheet. And we'll also make sure that if you send me or Ramon an email, we can get a digital version of the map. Remember, we're lucky to be alive at the greatest age of social change yet. You and I, as the ones touching global citizens, have the chance to have the greatest impact. Let's be there when they're ready to buy. Let's help them learn when they want to learn. Let's enable them to self-express. Let's remember that we're changing their lives so that we, with HeroGen, can change the future. Thank you so much for listening to me and sharing this time with me. Ramon, thank you for asking me right now. It's about 10:30. Do we have a few minutes or do we need a break? We got a break. I'll be down here for any questions. An honor and a pleasure. Safe travels.